Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this edition of Viewpoint. Tonight, we will be looking at the issues happening in and around our country. And in this edition, we talk about the rising rate of immorality in Cameroon. To talk with us, we have a guest out of the country. This would be the second time we are talking with her. And we have one who is here with us in the studio. We'll go straight away out of the country to receive Fong Linda. She is a motivational speaker. Good evening, Linda, and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Good evening, Venatius, and thank you for inviting me once more. Thank you.
Thank you. It's our pleasure as well to have you with us. In the studio, we have Mr. Bekwa Jerome. He is a teacher. Good evening, sir, and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Good evening, Mr. Venatius, and good evening to Linda Fon. I am happy to be here with you this evening.
Thank you. We'll go ahead. We know that Viewpoint is divided into two parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 1, we're talking about the questions, the yes and the no. And then part 2, we take the explanations, your reasons why. So we'll go straight away to take the yes and no in the first part of the program. If you are just joining us, you are watching The Viewpoint here on DBS television. We are equally broadcasting live on our Facebook page. We take the questions and we'll begin with question 1. Linda, I will begin with you. Rising rates of immorality in our society, a sign of failure in our educational system?
Yes.
All right. Linda says yes. Mr. Jerome, I take your view.
Yes, it's a sign of failure.
Jerome says yes. We take the second question. Mr. Jerome, I begin with you. Should we blame anyone for such trends in our society today?
Yes, we should.
Okay, we should blame someone. Linda, I'm with you. Should we blame anyone for all these rising rates of immorality in our society?
I would agree with Mr. Jerome. I think we should.
Good. Those are your viewpoints. So we go straight to take part 2 of the program, which will be the debate. "20 students in Kribi have been called up for explanation as a result of a video that is circulating on social media concerning very obscene acts that they carried out. Over 40 students in Yaoundé were arrested linked to the consumption of drugs. And in Kumba, in the southwest region, 80 students were arrested and brought to book because they have been involved in gang group sex and consumption of drugs. Here in Douala, cases of violence has been recorded as well concerning students, our young people. What is the responsible for this rising rates of immorality in our society? And our guest, Linda, thinks that it is a failure in our education. Linda, please, let's hear you out.
Okay, thanks for giving me the floor. And I earlier question, I think it is a failure in our education. But you have to remember here, I'm talking about on the broad scale. Like about within police, I'm talking about educating our society, I'm talking about education within it as a whole, because learning is junior. So I feel like as a society, especially with families, that day, you understand in the inability to teach the children. So if we cannot instill good values in our kids, obviously they are going to waywardness, they are going to express fullness, they are going to carry along with them all these negative attributes that we as a society consider as not a positive thing, because it's out. It's not a process, and are usually of as people within the home. They are a reflection of people in the community. They are a reflection of people in a society. So when society continues to hold good moral standards, continuously to instill good values in its children, things like this bound to happen. Also about exposure, shifting societal values and to other cultures. With the recent of the presence of the social media, where people in the room can happen all the world within the twinkle of an eye, it makes my kids exposed to things that they normally wouldn't, and then encourages them to imitate those behaviors, which usually know a reflection of our original African society. So the family as a unit need held responsible for this. The school to a very extent, because schools are responsible to children become professionals in the society. They are not responsible to moral values in that. Even if they do, it's to a very less extent. So our families, said earlier, have to be held responsible for our churches. How many you go to and you see a pastor preaching like, if I think this, I don't want to go too deep into this because this is another day. But you know, I know there are a lot of so many atrocity that happen within the church community. And then I say, well, what do we tolerate? What do we normalize? And all these things, we just expose this kid to a lot of stuff, and we fail to educate them on this that we're exposed to. You can have, like, even them listen to sexes. Decide to sell ability for kids to lie, to steal, to do. They are kind of glowing, you know, all the negative stereotypes in the past considered as taboo. But because our music and our society, like leaders in our communities, not even showing good in the younger ones, all these things, it leads to the deterioration of the moral standards. So society has deteriorated to this level. How can we not be held accountable for the for the decay of the moral, especially in our children? How can we?
Okay, Linda, although the sound quality at one point were not going through, but we could understand about the exposure our children have to the social media that has completely killed our African culture, the failure of the family, the failure of our various church communities as well to preach these moral values that we had, or that Africa was proud of in the yesteryears. Now, we'll remain with you, Linda, because we're coming back to you shortly. Let us find out from Mr. Bekwa Jerum, the rising rate of immorality in our society. You think it is a failure in our education?
Thank you, Mr. Venasius. As I said earlier, it is a failure in our society, and it is a failure in our educational system. And I want to say the education of every child begins right from the fireside. And as it begins from the fireside, it begins with the smallest unit of the community, which is a family. And the way our children are trained in our families today, they live exactly the kind of life that they are seeing us living. And I would like to say that it will be very hard for you to plant the seedling of a mango and you go harvesting that of a plum. And you can never plant a bean seed and you harvest a granite. It is impossible. And I think that the children, the behavior of our children, of the students out there, they are simply following the full step of the parents and some people in the society. I want to say it is a big failure in the educational system. Why? Because one, the government has contributed to the failure of morals in our school, because when you look many years behind, we used to have religious studies in our school, and because the religious studies has been withdrawn from the school curriculum, you see that moral education in our school has flown through the window. And this is where I say the government has failed. And when you get into our churches, you see that there is a total failure, because even in our churches today, the message of repentance is no more heard, but it is only the message of prosperity that is being lauded all around the churches. And now, when you look at what happened in Kribi, Yaoundé, Kumba, and here in Douala, you are thinking what the society of tomorrow is going to look like. Mr. Venatius, I want to take us back last year, still in the educational milieu. Last year, teachers were the point of target last academic year, because teachers were targeted by students, teachers were targeted by parents, and teachers were targeted by stakeholders. And this year, the reverse has become that of immorality within the school milieu. A school milieu where we all know that it is a place where we have to set the pace for a good educational standard for our children. It is a place where we know that we have to cause our children to live the life that will represent the entire society. Today has become a place where we are even afraid to send our children there. Why? Social media is one of the causes, and the parents are equally one of the causes, because most of the telephones our children are using today are provided to them by their parents. A child who is in Form 1, when you see the kind of telephone the child in Form 1 is using, you cannot think, you will not imagine that that child can afford that telephone for himself. It is being provided by the parents. And I think that as much as these ICT tools are used for educational researches, the uses should be limited to our children. Because the kind of videos they installed in their telephones and watched thereafter are what is pushing them to the wall. So I think that it is a big failure in the educational system here in our country.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bekwa. I'll take Linda again to find out from her before we go to the second question. Linda, we are talking about education, and we know that education is both formal and informal. What about the informal sector of education? I'm talking of the education by our parents, education at home. How has that contributed to this rising rates of immorality in our society?
I think I did talk on that. Maybe when you guys had the little technical glitch there, you might not have heard I said. I'm still going to reiterate. The family as a whole is failing. Like what the teacher said, sorry, I forgot the name. What was your name again, sir? Hi. Oh, sorry. Can you guys hear me?
We're getting you all right. Go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just asking what your name was, because I was the reference said, right? You mentioned like a fruit, like you can't expect to get a citrus or get mangoes. You understand? One thing about children and family is our children, their values, as they grow up to life is still, I mean, in us by our parents, and we also have the responsibility in those values in our children when they're young, because at a younger age, they are like a sponge, a foam that absorbs and stuff. Then again, I want to be very cautious. Parents, there are many parents who try their best to raise their children in the way they do the right. And as you also remember, they always say you can give birth to the child, give birth to the child's heart. But as in relation to your question, sorry that I'm going, but I'll clarify my basis first before I do what I have to say. I feel like even those ones who are trying to bring their children up in the right way, they are failing to a very great end. And I talk about sexual education, because from what I understand about what we're talking here about the immorality, it's more about like sexual promiscuity, drugs, and all those. As parents, do we take and sit with our children, explain to them the ills of these things? Because I remember growing up, my mom used to say, "Oh, don't do this, don't date a guy, don't sleep with a man." She just wants me. Did she ever have a time where she sat down with me, explained to me why she thought what she thought? This is what parents are, and this is where the age comes in. You have to teach your children not by wanting them, instilling fear in them about in society, but talking to them, making yourself accessible to these children, explaining things to them that will enable them to be informed. Whatever decision they are making, they'll make in vision. So I am repeating again, the of our African parents to instill good values in our children, one of the reasons, and the other is we have the failure of our African parents to be active in the nurturing and the upbringing of their children. And as I said, presence doesn't mean, oh, you presence means there for you. I will talk to you. I will explain my experiences with you. Show these things that we feel like we shouldn't. You understand? The kids feel normal about things involving alcohol, even included in education curriculum. Important things. Our children have a lot of exposure. Where do they learn the real facts about when we talk about it at home? Things that we should talk about them. Normalize talking about them. So that's to say about the informal influence on the digital and social values.
What we give to our children is what we take back, like Mr. Jerome was saying. And parents, you know, who take the time to bring up their children in the right way, they may be confronted with other external influences. That is why we are going to question 2, which you have started even touching it, Mr. Bekwa. We're asking, should we blame anyone for such trends in our society? You started talking about the government and the parent. Please, can we go?
Unlike I said before, there is someone to be blamed. Parents have their blame.
Yes.
The children are also responsible for their acts, and they have to be blamed for their immoral acts. Mm-hmm. The society has to be blamed, and the state has its own responsibility as far as the blame is concerned. Mm-hmm. Parents have the duty of educating their children, because every education begins at home before you get into the external world. And since education begins right at the fireside, that is where the parental responsibility begins.
Like Linda was saying.
Yeah, that is where the parental responsibility begins. And parents should equally stop inflicting fear in their children with the kind of approach they take towards them, especially when it comes to sexual education. Mm-hmm. And there are some children that they grew up in the family, their parents have never spoke to them as far as sexual education is concerned.
Mr. Bekwa, I'm not cutting you, but you would understand that in our African culture, sex as a whole was a taboo.
It used to be a taboo, but nowadays
it
sex
should
not be a taboo. We have to tell our children what is real. Yes. If you have a girl child in your house that is already about 10 years upward, and you do not start talking to her about her menstrual cycle, by the time she finds herself in that situation, she will be caught with fear. Whereas if you begin educating her with exactly what she will find herself with in the future, then by the time she finds herself in such situation, she will take it normal, and a solution will easily be found as far as that is concerned. Now let me get to the society. Today in the society, before now, when a parent made another child whom is not his biological child in the society doing something wrong, that parent will be able to say, my son, my daughter, stop that. But today, that is not the case, because if you speak to someone's child out there, you will be taken to court by the parent. The parent will ask you, who gave you the audacity to talk to my child? And now, before now, when we were in the school, when we were in school, our teachers will tell us what is right and what is not correct. But today, everything has turned around. You will see teacher to student relationship, and some teachers will even call them their bush allowances. That is a failure.
Yes.
That is a failure. And we shouldn't accept that. And now, let us get into the society, in the churches. Yesterday or before now, ministers of God will speak, tell the people, tell the Christians that are listening at them the word of God that will cause them to change, that will transform them from bad to good. But today, most ministers of God, not all of them, are mostly concerned with the message of prosperity, and the message of repentance doesn't exist. Because even some of these ministers of God, when you discover what they are doing and you are asked even to get into some of the churches, you will say, I better stay at home. But I am not saying that we should stay at home, because fellowship is one of the greatest value of a human being. Let us get to the house of God, listen to the message of God, and make sure that the message of God should transform us and transform our families. Let me tell you something, Mr. Venatius. I usually speak to my people in my dialect. And when I'm talking to my people in my dialect, in the Bamisin language, I will tell them that ban leye nkub nubabane chanje.
Yes.
Ban leye la le mole ngi ngwane se ban tongbung yambe che. Ban tongbung yambe bon ye no.
Yes, so that we can understand too.
So that we can understand too. So what am I saying? Let us even watch the kind of churches we are sending our children to go to. Let us even, when you are sending your child in a particular school, find out the history of that school before you send your child there. Okay. Because when you cannot send your child into a school where there is no discipline. Okay. Because discipline is one of the factors that make up the educational career of every child.
Okay. Now, Mr. Bekwa, we will be getting back to you in a short while. Let us take the views of Linda, who is out there, and she thinks that we should blame someone for this rising rate of immorality in our society. Linda, who?
Well, I couldn't agree with Mr. Bekwa. The society has a very huge role to play in all that we are dealing with. We should blame the society. The society is very broad. And the government. What is the government doing to ensure that there is some kind of check and balances when it comes to exposure in social media? Although that might be very difficult to control, like the government has a role to play. Mr. mentioned something that really stuck out for me. I have an example that I want to bring up. It was the last time that the government or the people who are supposed to portray good morals are accountable for their own immoralities? When was the first time, or when did that ever happen? You see older generation guys, people taking advantage of young girls and young children all over the place, and no anything. Like, society has blinded its eyes to all these atrocities. An example is, you see a young goes to a bar, you hear sorry, I heard. You hear a young guy goes to the bar, young girl goes to the bar. What is the institution in place to ensure that alcohol is not sold on the agent? Do we have any of such institutions in place? We don't. I can guarantee you that a 12-year-old kid can go into a liquor store and grab a bottle of beer, and they will give to that child and in front of every adult, and nobody will do anything about it. So when we just let they sit there in our communities, in our societies, how can we say that this doesn't affect the moral standards of our children? Talk about the music that we promote. Talk about the media. How many star education are making? Most of the sex, they sell violence, they sell theory, they sell a lot of negative aspects, and we normalize that. Parents going to encouraging their children to live their life in a question manner. And I said before, and I'm going to say again, I reflect us from the family level, the bigger level, and to the state as a whole. And if we do anything, we're bound to even see a 40K in our social standards and our social values. And again, the right, which some people might include, but which I think is very important, is the ecosystem. Rampant poverty, like all over, like not the abuse and the lack economic opportunities for the weak girl child. It puts them in a risky and vulnerable situation where they are more willing to do whatever they do to our basic necessities of life. And all of these, maybe it might be just like extra part, but it's something which has to be shared. Life has to be shared. It's an important part, ensuring that we have a healthy.
Okay, Linda, time, the technicians are indicating to us that we are running out of time. We are sorry we cannot drive this discussion to the end, but we must take appointment with our viewers that we are going to extend it and take it deeper, because this is a real cankerworm, Mr. Jerome, that is already eating our society.
Actually, it is a cankerworm that is eating our society. And let me say, traditional education remains traditional education, and parents should stop shifting responsibility.
Correct.
So if I have to say the last thing to my people, Mr. Venatius, I say, for time conscious, I say, please let us focus on the education of our children, and to tell particularly the Bamisin people that we are people of not disgrace. We do not want such disgrace to happen in our society.
Okay.
Banle rendezvous. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, the Bamisin people who you've gotten the message. Ladies and gentlemen, Linda, we hope we will still get back to you in subsequent editions of the program where we will take this argument further. Ladies and gentlemen, for time constraint, we will put an end to today's edition of the program here. Immediately after this would be the primetime news here in English language with Cynthia Ngwemo. Until we meet again some other time, have a blessed evening and goodbye.